It was 10 years ago when a 17-year-old pregnant girl left her home in St. Pete and never returned.
You didn't only kill my child, you killed your own. You're worthless.
A family was devastated and a community was outraged when a 17-year-old girl was killed by her 25-year-old boyfriend. But what was it that made everyone so angry and sparked such vicious comments from her mother? And why is that anger just as strong today, over 10 years since the murder?
It was good for him to know that I don't forgive him. He shows no grief. He doesn't care. 40 years wasn't enough. But then again, a million years wouldn't have been enough for me.
Morgan Martin was a beautiful 17-year-old girl who was loved and cherished by her family and friends. She was the life and soul of the party, and she had more friends than you could ever imagine. Of course, she was popular with the boys, and no one was too surprised when she announced that she was pregnant. Her family were the most shaken, though they were ultimately excited for Morgan to become a mother. Morgan told everyone that the father to her unborn daughter was a 24-year-old man named Jacoby Flowers. They met on Facebook and struck up a relationship there, eventually meeting several times before Morgan fell pregnant. Her mother wasn't overly happy about her choice of father, as she was a lot younger than him. On top of that, the two of them weren't even together, and they just hooked up every so often. Jacoby even had other girlfriends, but Morgan's mother could only advise her daughter, not make her choices for her.
And no, they weren't dating. They had just met on Facebook and were just messing around, I guess. They weren't dating or anything. He does have a girlfriend and everything that he lives with currently.
Okay, your daughter is 17 and he's 25. Okay,
when he first met her on Facebook, she was only 16.
At around the 4-month mark of her pregnancy, Morgan found out that she would be having a girl. She had never put much thought into whether she wanted a boy or a girl, but she was delighted to be having a daughter of her own. In fact, if truth be told, she was already planning outfits and cute photo shoots for her little girl when she was born. Morgan had even picked out a name, Julia Raquel. At just before midnight, Morgan told her mother and sister that she was just going outside to talk to Jacoby, the father of her unborn child. Her mother told her that she shouldn't have anything to do with him, but Morgan insisted that they were only going to talk. She watched Morgan walk out of the door, still dressed in her pajamas and clutching only her phone. Still, there was nothing to indicate that she was in any kind of trouble or that anything was wrong. Morgan told her sister not to lock the door, as she would be right back. Little did anyone know that that would be the last time that any of them ever saw her again.
And then one night in 2012, Morgan left her home and never returned.
At 5 a.m., Morgan's mom got up for a glass of water and noticed that her bedroom lights were still on and her air conditioning was still blasting. She assumed that her daughter was in her bedroom watching TV or playing on her phone. At 17 years old, it wasn't out of the ordinary for girls as popular and well-loved as her to be up all night texting and hanging out with friends online. Smiling, her mom thought nothing of it, and she went back to bed. But the next day, no one saw Morgan. She wasn't in her room, and she wasn't picking up her phone, or answering text messages or messages on social media. That was pretty unusual for a girl who was usually glued to her phone and enjoyed being online. She would normally respond in moments. This is why Morgan's mother and sister decided that the best course of action would be to report her missing to the authorities.
On July 25, 2012, Morgan disappeared from her family home in St. Petersburg, Florida, a short time after midnight. She told her family members she was going outside to meet her baby father, known to them as Jacoby Flowers.
Morgan had run away before, but she had returned home not too long after. But this was different. Immediately, the authorities decided that this wasn't just a case of Morgan running away again. She left the house wearing only her pajamas and slippers, and she was carrying only her phone. If she intended to run away, she would have taken more with her than that. She didn't take her purse, money, or any ID either. Morgan also stopped communicating with her friends around that time too. It was all very strange. The police got to work trying to track Morgan's movements that night, but they found it incredibly difficult to figure out where she was. As the days ticked by, Morgan's family got more and more distressed, knowing that she wouldn't leave her family behind with no explanation. There had to be an unfortunately sinister answer for why she had gone missing. The authorities not only interviewed the man Morgan said was the father to her unborn child, but they also took DNA samples from her entire family and made arrangements to go to the home to gather any evidence that might help them in their search. But days stretched into months, and still Morgan remained missing. There was no extra information coming in, no leads for the police to start following, and no indication as to what had happened that night. Slowly but surely, the case started to grow cold.
The initial investigation was unable to locate Morgan, but detectives focused in at the time on 24-year-old Flowers.
In the first few months, a lot of the suspicion had fallen on the person who was supposedly the father of Morgan's baby, Jacob E. Flowers. Police looked into his past and brought him in for questioning. They thought that he might be evasive and uncooperative, but he seemed more than happy to speak with the police and help them in their investigation. This was definitely weird, as police thought that he would not want to assist them in their search.
And have you been fully cooperative with police?
Fully cooperative. Like, I've came to the station every time they've asked me to come. Like, I've never skipped town. I've never not talked to them when they needed to talk to me, to a certain degree.
Jacoby did, however, try to minimize his relationship with Morgan and make it seem unimportant and as if it were just some fling that they had together.
Flowers denied any knowledge of Morgan's whereabouts, minimized his relationship with Morgan, and he denied being the father of the unborn child.
The police seemed satisfied with everything Jacoby told them. However, friends of Morgan didn't think that he was telling the truth. Indeed, even though police seemed satisfied with Jacoby's answers when they questioned him, all of the evidence still pointed directly at him as the last person to have seen Morgan alive, and for him to be the only person to know where she might be.
No, is this guy responsible for this? It sure kind of points to that direction, but we can't say so for sure.
But that really doesn't matter. As you know, a person of interest, a suspect, they don't have to call him anything. He's the target of this investigation, for sure.
A full year after Morgan disappeared, her family knew that they had to do something to boost her story back into the public conscience. They couldn't let Morgan down by not continuing to try to investigate her disappearance and find where she was. So the family, with a little help from law enforcement officers, put up flyers around the town in hopes that seeing them would jog people's memories. And maybe, just maybe, they would remember some key detail that would crack this case wide open. Her mother spoke to local news stations, and although they were searching for new information, she was under no illusions that Morgan was probably not alive anymore. It was heartbreaking to have to deal with that, but her mother had to continue the fight in order to get answers and bring whoever might have harmed Morgan to justice. It was all she could do for her beautiful daughter at that point. Morgan's case was eventually transferred over to the homicide department. There had been no actual evidence that she had been murdered, but homicide may be able to help out in ways that other law enforcement departments couldn't. They had all kinds of resources that could help find where she was, as well as tips and tricks for finding victims of homicides, as well as the perpetrators. An interesting bit of information that came to light was that Morgan's cell phone was last detected in Hudson, a town over 40 miles away from where she was living in St. Petersburg. A drive there would take close to an hour. This raised all kinds of alarms and questions as to why Morgan was even so far away from home in nothing but her pajamas. And why had her cell phone stopped being detected? Had the battery died?
I'm wondering, if she walks out in her PJs and slippers with just a cell phone, how did she end up 40 miles away in Hudson? Does Morgan or the baby's father have any connection to this location called Hudson?
Leah, nobody that we know of. I didn't even know where Hudson was until somebody told me whenever they started finding her phone reception was coming from there. I didn't even know where Hudson was.
In an interview with a local station, Morgan's mother once again pleaded for more information. They at last had an approximate location for her, and perhaps someone in the Hudson area would be able to provide some information.
It's a very it's a very like small community. There's not a lot of people around. It's when you talk to the people there, and when we went there to do a search and stuff to see what we could find and hand out some more flyers up there, it's a community that people have lived there for a very long time. Their families have.
It was a long shot, especially considering how over a year had passed since Morgan disappeared, but it was worth a try. Her mother deserved to give Morgan, and Morga's unborn daughter, a proper burial. Still, there was no new information. 3 years later, in the March of 2015, a brand new cold case department was opened up in the police department. They decided that they wanted to take a look at Morgan's case, and once again started diligently working on it. There were several officers assigned to the case, as well as a highly skilled data analyst who would be able to comb through all the information they had and hopefully pick up on something crucial that had been missed.
In March of 2015, St. Petersburg newly created cold case unit took a look at Morgan's disappearance and began to renew efforts and to solve the case.
A few months later, in July of 2015, ABC aired an exclusive interview with Jacoby Flowers, who was finally named as a person of interest in Morgan's case. In the interview, though, Jacoby said that he was not the father of Morgan's baby, and repeatedly stated that the two of them had not even been romantically involved or even hooked up.
All right, so I want to be absolutely 100% clear. This is absolutely, she was not pregnant with your child.
Not at all.
You never had sex with Morgan Martin.
Not at all. Never.
He said he knew her from around the neighborhood, but that was the extent of their relationship, saying that Morgan's family had made a lot of it up. When asked about why they would have made something like that up, though, Jacoby suggested that Morgan had made things up about him, saying that she was younger than him and less mature. He also pointed out that he thought the police were only naming him as a suspect because they needed to pin the case to someone, implying that they had no real reason to suspect him of any wrongdoing. He repeatedly said that they had no evidence against him, and that they must have had some kind of grudge against him. It was a very candid and at times concerning interview.
You know, you're looking for my daughter, have you seen her? I'm like, no, I haven't seen her. Okay, she's like, okay, I gotta send the cops out you. Okay, send them. I have nothing to hide. You can come to my house, you can look around, you can talk to my roommates, my neighbors. I have nothing to hide, you know what I mean? I feel like, yes, you know what I'm saying, that the family wants to find her, the mother wants to find her daughter. I understand all of that, but that does not mean try to ruin my life in the same time that this is going on.
But in a rebuttal interview, the police chief said that there was plenty of evidence that Jacoby was the last person to see Morgan alive. The truth was that Jacoby had actually had brushes with the law before. He had been arrested and also fled from police, something that didn't back up his story of being whiter than white. Police continued with their investigation, subpoenaing people, getting search warrants, and interviewing many different people who may be able to help with the cold case. Officers traveled up and down the state to gather evidence, and even across state lines into Georgia, all in search of the truth. And ultimately, the police decided that they had enough evidence to bring Jacoby back in, this time not for questioning, but to charge him. He was kept behind bars until his court case came up.
Our investigation will show that Jacob Flowers planned Morgan's murder. He duped her into coming out to meet him. He killed her, and then he dumped the body.
What was revealed was that Jacoby and Morgan had a very complicated relationship. Jacoby was in a relationship with another woman at the same time as seeing Morgan, and he was shocked when Morgan became pregnant. He didn't want his partner to find out, so he denied he was the father to the unborn baby.
According to detectives, he begged her not to have the baby because he was in another relationship.
Our ultimate goal is to locate Morgan Martin and to bring her home for her family. And as far as I see it, this case is not closed until that happens.
He had even gone so far as to beg Morgan not to carry the baby and give birth to it, instead insisting that she had an abortion, something that Morgan was not happy about or willing to do.
According to court records, he texted, "You have your whole life for this. Don't do this to me."
It really did seem like Jacoby did not want Morgan to keep the baby, despite Morgan being excited and already making plans. But was this enough to push him to breaking point and make him kill her? All signs were pointing towards that being the case. Meanwhile, Jacoby had found himself behind bars for an unrelated traffic incident. While the traffic incident and Morgan's death were unrelated, it still all case him in a bad light, and went a long way to painting a bad picture, oh him, in prosecutors' minds. So it was no surprise when, before too long, they decided to officially charge Jacoby for Morgan's murder.
This morning, the detective from the cold case unit went to Avon Park Correction Institute and told Flowers of the indictment. Flowers had no reaction and did not want to speak to the detectives.
There was an unexpected twist at trial, though. Jacoby actually admitted to killing Morgan. He did not delve into his motives or how he did it, but he did show a surprising amount of regret and remorse for what he did. He spoke openly to the judge in the courtroom.
There's not a day that goes by in the last 10 years that I haven't felt the deepest level of regret and remorse for my actions.
While it was a strangely open and honest thing for Jacoby to do, it still bought him no leniency when it came to the judge's decision. Ultimately, Jacoby Flowers was found guilty of Morgan's murder. He had the option of receiving a lesser sentence if he was willing to let authorities know exactly where Morgan's body was. The judge said that if they were to recover her remains, the 40-year sentence that he was facing would be cut down to only 20 years.
Earlier this week, Flowers led investigators to the location in Alabama where he says he buried Morgan's body in 2012. Authorities searched for several days but didn't find her. St. Pete police say they won't stop looking.
Our ultimate goal is to locate Morgan Martin and to bring her home for her family. And as far as I see it, this case is not closed until that happens.
Sadly, the police never found any sign of Morgan's body. Was that the right place? Had he really buried her there? Or was this just a red herring, a way of wasting police time and trying to get under their skin? No one could be sure, but the judge, true to his word, handed down the maximum sentence of 40 years in prison.
Now, today, Jacoby Flowers, the father of that unborn child, was sentenced to 40 years in prison for her murder, but not before hearing dramatic testimony from Morgan Martin's loved ones.
Unfortunately, some questions would forever remain unanswered. Why was Morgan's cell phone detected in Hudson? For what reason had he killed her? And how did he actually do the terrible deed? Jacoby was unwilling to answer any questions, being far less cooperative with police than during the initial investigation. That meant that Morgan's family, most specifically her mom, would forever have unanswered questions that would burn in their minds. There was one upside to the court case, though. In that courtroom, Morgan's mother got to come face to face with Jacoby, the man who had killed her daughter. She got to tell him exactly what she thought, and her cathartic outburst moved everyone in the courtroom, even bringing some close to tears.
It was my child. She was my daughter, and she was so good-hearted. And I hope that every day that you sleep, you have to see her. Do you understand me? I hope you see her face.
It was good for him to know that I don't forgive him. He shows no grief. He doesn't care. 40 years wasn't enough. But then again, a million years wouldn't have been enough for me.
With Jacoby now securely locked away behind bars, Morgan's family and friends can start to rebuild their lives. They can move on and hopefully remember the good and happy times that she brought into their lives. But while ever her body remained undiscovered, there would forever be a looming hood over their heads, reminding them that the terrible roller coaster is still into truly over.
Ultimate goal is to locate Morgan Martin and to bring her home for her family. And as far as I see it, this case is not closed until that happens.
So now it's over to you. What did you think of this horrifying story? Why do you think Jacoby killed poor Morgan? Was it because of the unborn baby? Or do you think there was another reason behind the deadly attack? And do you think Jacoby knows the true location of Morgan's body? As always, we love to hear from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Please give us a like and a subscribe, and thanks for watching.